If you are watching this video, I'd like to say thank you very much for purchasing my pattern and accessing the sew along tutorial. My name is Steph and this is a sew along for the Patchwork Duo small and large knitting and crochet project bag. Just a few things before we get started for the way this video is going to work. The tutorial just follows along a very basic bag, but I have included the instructions for how to apply interfacing if that's an option, and how to do your quilting with your batting if that is an option you're choosing as well. The interfacing is applied to the lining fabric, so you can do that when you do the lining fabric. And if you choose to then do the quilted option, your quilting is on the outer fabric, so your patterned fabric. So bear that in mind as you're going along. If you want the quilted version, make sure that you add the quilting to your outer fabric, the pretty fabric. And if you're making interfacing, that is going on your lining fabric, a plain fabric as you will. So I'll just demonstrate here now. So this is my lining fabric and that has the interfacing on here. So this makes the bag stand up and not be floppy. And then if you're making the quilted option, you can see that this bag has been quilted, but only the quilting on the outer fabric and the batting. The inside, the lining, has not been quilted. So just bear that in mind as you go through, because if you're just blindly following, you might get a little bit confused. Everything is in the chapter titles. If you do have any questions whatsoever, drop them in the comments box below and I will try and get back to you within 12 hours at least, depending on time zones. Now, before we jump straight into the tutorial, go ahead, sit down with your pattern and decide what type of bag you want to make. I do recommend that you read through all the instructions first, and there is a section at the back of the pattern where you can design your own. It's just got a blank pattern there and you can just colour in, shade, make notes. The obvious first step in this sewing pattern is to decide what variation of bag you want to make and what additions you want to make to your project. And in today's tutorial we'll be looking through a few different options. We will be looking at adding interfacing to the small bag and adding quilting, batting to the larger bag option. After you've cut out all your pieces, all your batting or interfacing, decide what you want to do. You want to come over to your ironing board and you want to do all of your pressing first, because that kind of just gets it all out of the way at the beginning, so then once you get to sewing you can just fly through the sewing steps really easily. We're going to start off with the channels. So this is the drawstring. So this bag is the small one, the yellow and orange is the small, and this is going with the large channels. So you are going to want to fold over both these short ends by 1/4 of an inch once, press, twice, press. So do that to each of your pieces. So we'll be using this. And honestly, it's kind of just a rough guide. If you want to do a little bit longer, you can do. Once you've got a little bit of heat in your ironing board, it makes the finger pressing a little bit easier as well. Be careful not to burn your fingers. So you go ahead and do all 4 pieces and then we'll come back. Channels have been folded over twice by 1/4 of an inch on the short edge. And then what you're going to do, so you have this here, you're going to fold it wrong sides together and then you're going to give that a good press as well. And that's just to put the fold line in, and just make it a little bit easier when it comes to sewing this in later. So the next stage for these will be sewing along these short edges to keep that seam pressed down. And again, with your pockets, fold over the tops by 1/4 inch twice and press. And again, you want to top stitch along there as well to keep that pressed down. So that's my larger pocket. Now this is my smaller pocket. While you are at your iron, you want to decide how many stitch markers, loops, you want on the inside to add your stitch markers to, or scissors. These can also be used as loops to add on handles to as well if you want to add a handle onto your bag. So for this, you're going to fold it in half along the long ways, and you're folding that in half wrong sides together. You're going to open it up. So now we have this lovely crease line down the middle. You're going to fold each side into that crease line. So you make it into thirds. So now you have something that looks like this. There's your fold on the other side. Again, you're folding this in to the wrong sides together. So if you've got patterned fabric, you should be able to see only patterned fabric right now. So now you have this. When you open it up, now basically this is the way you make bias tape. So now you've got this fold, the seam down the middle, this line where the fabric meets, fold that in half again. So you ended up with this. And give it a good press. So this is what you end up look like. So that's the original. And now it just keeps its position. So when you fold that in, you have a handy little loop. Go ahead and top stitch all of your channels, your loops, and your pockets. Now I am chain piecing these. So if you've never seen that, I will show you now. And I'm using a stitch length of 2. Now I'm not doing the backwards and forwards locking it in because I will be sewing these channels in. I'll be sewing all the raw edges in. So then instead of cutting the fabric, I'm just pulling it. So as you can see, it's like a little chain going out the back. It just makes it slightly quicker and saves on some thread. Go ahead, then snip. Each one. So this is what you end up. So I'm showing you in white thread just to show you, and then I'll go ahead and do the other ends of the channels as well. So now you have all of your top stitching done. You can put all of those pieces to one side. Now we're gonna sew the outer fabric first, because I just think this is nice, easy sewing. It's really enjoyable. So it might help for you to place out what your bag is gonna look like, because you might have chosen to have all 4 sides in a patchwork design. You might have chosen all 4 sides to have it all matching. So for me, I really do like to visualize all of my bag first. So this is what my bag is going to look like. So first off, I'm going to sew my 2 patchwork sides together first. Then I will sew my 2 blanks to the base, and then I will sew it all together. So my patchworks, remembering here we are using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just placing all my pieces so I know this is the sewing edge. So I can just go to my machine really quickly, and then I can sew all of these pieces down. Now, if you're still a beginner sewer or you struggle, I would recommend pinning your sides or adding quilting clips. And again, we are chain piecing these. So now we have all our pieces. Now I'm going to place these back out in the right design again, and I'm going to clip all these together. Now, there's a few different methods you can use for making sure that you get really nice, clean seams. And I will show you both of them here now. But I would recommend not skipping this step because it really is very important. So we are going to want this to be a nice little 4 patch. So what you can do is you can fold one seam this way and the other seam the other way. And then get your iron. So I've got my little clover iron, which is a really handy just little desk iron. It saves me going up to my machine, and I'm just going to give that a nice press. So now my seams are facing opposite directions. We're going to butt them up together. You press one way, press the other way. And I'm going to put a clip in there. And then I will sew along there with 1/4 of an inch, and then I will show you what that looks like. Now the other method is to get your 2 squares, and you're going to press this seam open like so. So get a nice finger press first, and then in with the iron. And again, make sure that you line up these 2 seams really nicely. And again, I just use quilter's clips, but it might be better for you to use pins. You have to find your own style. And again, sew along here at 1. So this seam is the one where we did the seams in the opposite directions. And this is what you've ended up with. very, very nice clean patch. So again, go ahead and give that a good press. And then onto the second one where we pressed open the seams. And again, that's come out really well, but that's because I took my time, I pressed and I really looked at what I was doing, and I used plenty of clips. So when I first started out, I was not as careful and things didn't come out as nice, and I used to get really frustrated because I just skipped a lot of important steps because I rushed through it because I didn't really see the value in jumping up to the iron so often. But getting my little desk iron here and this pressing mat has changed that, because now I can take the time and I've learned to enjoy the process. So again, press open that seam. This is what this one looks like from the back. So now we can go ahead and start sewing up this into a box shape. We have our panel here. So just go ahead and press out these seams. I'm just going to press them out. Now it is time to sew the patchworks onto the base as well. So as you can notice, this is nice and centered. You have a 1/4 inch overhang on each side. Now this is important to get a really nice finished corners. So you're going to want to start stitching where that seam starts. You don't want to start from the very end of this patch pocket here. Same on this side, so I will put pins in. I'm putting a pin right through that seam. So that gap there, we're not going to sew on that very small 1/4 inch there. We're going to sew all the way along here to your next pin, which is the next seam at the other end. You're going to sew between that needle and that needle. Then you will do the same on this side as well. Got that 1/4 inch gap there. Again at the other end and on this side as well. So now fold this open, and again give your seams a nice press. This is important, especially because this one is on the outside so you can see it. And now it is time to turn this into a box, which is the tricky part to get across in the written instructions. So you're going to take one patchwork corner, one patchwork side and one of your plain sides, or however you have it. So and then you're going to fold these together. So you are going to want to match up this corner and this corner. So when you have it out like this corner here and this corner. Then line up that whole side. I'm going to stick a couple of clips in. And then when it comes to the bottom, so this orange piece here is my base. I'm going to pull this out so I can see all this nicely. So this is my base. So you've got two sides to your base, and you're going to fold them like so, so they meet each other. So you can actually fold this box. So because you only sewed to 1/4 inch, this now should sit really nicely. And then you're going to sew down that side by 1/4 inch. And then I'll show you on the other sides again, in case I wasn't clear enough. Then we open it up and you have one perfect corner. So when I push this through, I mean, I do have a few escaping threads, but this is what the corner looks like. So let's try that again on a different corner. Got this orange corner here. Pull out your base. Fold your base in. So you got two of the sides meeting. Quarter inch all the way down there. Now I will say these sides are easier than the sides that have been pressed open. Now you can go ahead and trim all your threads if that is your preference. For me, I don't, because they're all getting hidden in the box. So now we have, so this is what our base is looking like. So let's turn it inside out, the right side out. And you can go ahead and use a pokey tool if you wish. You want to snip away any threads that are coming through to this side. As you can see, we have 4 nicely finished corners. It is time to move on to your lining fabric. Now you have 2 options here. You can leave it so it's nice and floppy, you get a nice floppy bag, or we can add interfacing. So for the interfacing, you are going to want to cut it 1/2 inch smaller than your squares. So if you're making the small bag, your squares will want to be 5.5 inches, because then this leaves a 1/4 inch all the way around, and that will just reduce bulk in your seams when you're sewing, like so. Now make sure that it is shiny side down. So this is the side with the glue. This is the side that you're going to want to be putting onto the wrong side of your fabric. So if you have a patterned fabric, make sure it's going on the wrong side. Now you can of course do this on your outer fabric. It doesn't really matter. I've chosen to put the interfacing on my lining fabric because this interfacing is not patchworked. It all just one plain fabric versus maybe my patchwork for the outer. But it is personal preference. Now you can just stick all of your interfacing squares down on a big piece of interfacing, press it all down and then cut it out afterwards, you're just going to get thicker seams. So it'll be just slightly more work for your sewing machine. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So go to your sewing machine and we are going to make all these attached to each other. Make sure that your iron is nice and hot and you don't have any steam turned on, and you will want some scrap fabric that is cotton or maybe a kitchen towel, because this is your fabric, this is your interfacing, and you're going to place the towel on top of here and then press with your iron. I have some scrap fabric here, and then we're going to hold this down for 20-ish seconds, nice and firm. Obviously, if your iron is hotter than mine, make sure you don't burn anything. Please be really careful with burning stuff. We're just giving it a nice solid press. So this is melting the glue from the interfacing, and it's going to melt into our fabric, and that is just going to fuse those two bits of fabric together. So you can always lift it and then see if it's stuck down. Yep, it's nice and stuck down. My squares moved a bit just because of my own carelessness. Make sure that you don't make the same mistake. Then go ahead and interface the rest of your lining fabrics or outer fabrics, whatever choice that you've made. So now you've just seen how to apply your interfacing. The other option you have is applying batting and quilting your side. So the quilting is done on the outside, so whereas the interfacing was applied to the lining fabric. So you can see the two designs I've done here, very simple, nothing too hard. So what you are going to want to get is your batting. Now I've just gone with a sort of a medium weight because that's what I had in. If you've got something lighter or something thicker, go ahead and use that. Now these blocks come out at 9 inches. So you are going to want to cut your quilting, your batting to 8.5, and you're going to place that right in the middle, so then you have a 8.5, so you have a 1/4 of an inch all the way around your batting, so you have space to sew and you're not ending up with really bulky seams then. It's 8.5 by 8.5. You're going to take your little 4 patch, open it up. Now I did the nested seams for this as well. As you can see, it came out pretty well. But this seam, this long seam here, I'm going to press open, and then I will press it open with the iron as well. Give it a good press, because I just want to reduce a little bit of the bulk around here. That seam's been pressed open. So I use some stick and spray. Give it a good press. Now place your batting right in the middle, making sure that you have that gap on all 4 sides. Now it does stretch out a bit. Give it a good press. And then you go ahead and decide on your design. So for this design and this design, I drew on the squares first, and I used this Threaders by Crafter's Companion. It didn't show up very well though, but that just irons off with heat. For this one, I am going to show you how I use my seam guide on my sewing machine to get perfectly evenly distributed lines. So this here is my seam guide. I would look up your own sewing machine's instruction how to install it, but I have had to take off my trusty walking foot to install this. So I think I want to go with 6/8, which is about 2 centimeters. Yeah, I'm just going to go there. So I'm going to line up my seam guide with the edge of my fabric and then just get sewing. So I'm going to use a length of 3 for this. And then snip at the end. Now I'm going to line that seam guide up with that first layer, that first row of stitches. So now I should get a perfectly even line. Now I did find that it is dragging a little bit, which is slightly annoying. So if I guide it through with both hands, it's a little bit better. I wouldn't say this is my preferred method. I think I'd rather draw on all of my lines first. Persevere we will. And that is our third quilted side. Now you could go ahead and add in the opposite lines as well, and that'll give it a super quilted look. This is the fourth design I've gone with, if you want some more ideas. So let's get back to the rest of the tutorial and we can go ahead and finish up sewing our bag. Now we are going to come and sew our lining together. Now this step is really important. If you have pockets, the pockets are going to get sewn into this lining in this stage now. So I want you to go ahead and place your pockets where you want them. So this is right sides facing up. This is the right side of my pocket and the wrong side of my pocket. You can see I folded that over twice and pressed. So you're going to put your pocket right side to wrong side. So right side of the interface of the lining. So the right side of the lining to the wrong side of the pocket. And they should match up nicely. So my pockets are going to go opposite each other. But you might have 4 pockets, you might have a large pocket and then a smaller pocket in front of it. You might choose to then, maybe you want to divide this big pocket in 2. So go just sew straight up the middle, which I might do on this one. And you're going to place, so this is the center, you're going to place this over one of the sides and you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down that side, then come back, press it open and then do the same with this side. So you're going to sew opposite sides together. As you can see, we've sewn these sides. I've sewn a line down here in this large pocket, so then I get 2 smaller pockets. And this is what it looks like from the back. I'm just going to press these seams the same way. So now we can come on and sew the 2 sides. So again, facing right sides together. But this time, we're going to place 2 pins. This piece of fabric is now longer than this because you've already taken away 1/4 of an inch at each end to sew. I want you to sew along here and leave 1/4 of an inch each end. So start 1/4 of an inch in and finish 1/4 of an inch in. So now you can sew in between those two pins. So do that on both ends. Now, because I stitch it in black thread, stopped 1/4 inch. So this stage again is really important. So we're going to open this up. This is what we are looking at. Now we have all 4 sides sewn onto our base piece here. We are going to decide where we want to put our stitch mark holder. So I think for me, I'm just going to place it here. So I'm going to place it 1.5 inches down from the top. And we're just going to pin this. Pin this in. So if you have wanting to add on handles onto this, make sure that you do sew in your loops to the outside fabric first. Now I want you to go ahead and sew up the corners as you did with the outer fabric. And again, it might just take a tiny little bit of manipulating to get that nice. So there's the base, and as before, you can just fold it like this. So again, so 1/4 inch all the way down here. So you can folding the base over so opposite corners hit. Helps this corner lay nice and flat. And voila, we have one lining piece. Now, for the stitch marker holder, I went over this 2 or 3 times just to make sure that it is really secure. Now we're on to step 6, which is the fun bit because this is the assembly. So we're going to place a lining bag inside the outer bag, right sides out. And then the outer fabric needs to be wrong sides out to you. So you are going to put in the lining bag, the lining, inside the outer, right sides together. Then you're going to go get your clips and your pins. So first off, all I want you to do is line up the 4 corners. And again, with the seams, I would just press them in opposite directions so you get a nice, neat finish. So really butt them up against each other. Now this bag has the long channels in it, so I want you to go get your 4 channels and make sure that they still have that fold. And for each channel, you're going to place it right in the middle of each side. And you're going to place it in between the outer fabric and the lining fabric. And make sure that all of the edges are nicely lined up. Because when you're sewing round, you don't want to be missing any of the channel pieces. So go and do that for all 4 sides. Now, as you can see from side 4, I've not put a clip in the middle, because what I'm going to do is leave about 2 to 3 inch gap right here. But with sewing the long piece, the long channel, I want to make sure that I do sew the first couple of centimeters either end, so it's definitely caught in, and then I will sew all the way around and leave this open. Now if you are sewing the short pieces, I would leave the gap over the corner pieces, so you're definitely sewing down all 4 channels. As you can see, I've left a gap for turning, and then I've sewn 1/4 of an inch all the way around, making sure that I've caught the channel. Now this is the fun bit. It is the turning right sides out. So find your hole like so, and then start grabbing the fabric and slowly pulling through the hole. I would recommend that where you left the hole, you really do reinforce the seam, going over it backwards and forwards a few times, and then just slowly pull this through. Being really gentle to make sure you do not rip that. And then we have the bag like this. Now you're going to want to take a turning tool or a knitting needle, and you're going to just gently push out all of these seams. So you do want a nice, clean finish on this bag. So that when you're ready, push the lining fabric inside of the outer. Now the channels are quite handy because you can just pull these up and it gives off a nice finish. Now I would recommend going ahead and giving this a very good press on all of these seams at the top. And then so here is where our hole is. So as you can see, this is completely out, but you just want to manipulate it like so. So this is nicely folded in on the inner and the outer. Stick in a couple of clips, and once you've given this a nice press, you are going to top stitch all the way around, so you are closing that hole, and it also just gives a really nice finish. Let's go ahead and do that. Now here I'm going to go for a stitch length of 3, just lengthening that slightly. And then just cutting off any threads I see. So with the top stitching all the way around, make sure you're actually sewing the bag, not the channel. You're going to sew just this side. So you're making sure that you're sewing on the lining piece. Now, look at that. See it clearer here. And then inside you've got your 2 pockets, you've got your loop for your stitch markers or scissors. Now you could in fact turn this right side out and have it the other way. So this is the lining, but for this particular one we have not made it reversible. You could have another pocket here. Now for the fun bit, which is getting your ribbon, or you can make a huge length of bias binding if you want it in the same colour fabric. And to make your binding, it's just the same method as you made your stitch marker loops. Now I'm going to go for some red ribbon because that is just what I have on hand. I'm going to go for a red and the yellow. So the ribbon length will be about 36 inches for the small bag and 54 inches for the large bag. You can choose it longer or shorter if you want. Now if you do not have a threader for your So this is a tool you can use for threading ribbon and elastic through casings. If you don't have one of them, go ahead and use a safety pin. So you start at one corner with one fabric and push all the way through the channel. And you're going to go through all four. Now you could just leave it like that, or you can add in a second. So that's the two ends. You're going to use the opposite corner and go through with the other length of ribbon. So then the ends of ribbon come out at opposite corners. So now let's fill her up. So I have some pre-yarn caked. So that is 100-gram ball. And you can see how much space I still have left in there. So I can also put in my, okay, I'm gonna stick in my notions pouch. I'm gonna stick that in that pocket over there. Now what else do I need in here? I do need some scissors, I think. So I've got my scissors and they're just going to go in this long pouch over here. Obviously you should have ends on your scissors, but I can't find my other scissors right now. And then I maybe want some stitch markers on my loop. Now if you don't want to put your notions pouch in, if you have your bulb, any of your stitch markers. So I have a darning needle, I have a little stitch marker here that says SSK. Attach that on as well. And maybe I want my K2 tog, and maybe I want to know how many stitches I casted on in the first place as well. And you know what, I may as well just stick my tape measure down. And maybe this is going to be a really chunky sock, so I want to just put on the Kitchener stitch, and honestly I'm just going to attach it just right on the corner on the outside. So when it comes to finishing off my sock, I know that it is my Kitchener stitch. And do you know what? Let's just go for it. I am very forgetful. So I am just going to put in my sewing pattern. I'm going to fold that up and stick that right in the corner. I mean, this is only a small bag, so I do have to fold this up like a few times. So that is what the inside is looking at. It should be busy. And I can fit more yarn in here as well. So I could technically get away with the second 100-gram ball, but I think it is a bit of a stretch. So maybe I'd put in some smaller bits. So maybe a contrast. And then simply pull it all together. And then that is your project bag. Now you can attach a wristlet, you can attach a handle, so you can have it as like a shoulder bag. Wristlets are good if you're wanting to like walk and sew, walk and knit at the same time. And tie her up like a present. And that is your finished bag. And that is your full tutorial. I hope you have enjoyed it.